Paul Salamoff is here, a self-proclaimed sci-fi and horror film addict. He is an extremely versatile artist. Listen to all the things that he does. Special effects, makeup. He has tons of credits, ranging from Ed Wood to There's Something About Mary. He's also an accomplished writer, director, actor, producer, and if that's not enough, he's a prolific author as well. He's penned several books drawing upon his love of film, including Movie Sets 101, The Definitive Survivor's Guide, and he co-authored with Chris Gore the complete DVD book as well. And his new book is called On the Set, The Hidden Rules of Movie Making Etiquette, which you can purchase from our home page. Just click on the icon of the front cover of that book. It'll take you to Amazon, and you can pick it up right now. Shay Crabtree of The Hollywood Reporter calls the book an indispensable introductory guide to modern-day movie sets. And we are pleased to welcome to the show Mr. Paul Salamoff. Let me bring him on here. Paul, are you with us?
I am with you. How are you doing, Jamie?
Hey, Paul. Great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
So I understand, like I said in the intro, that your movie motor was kind of turned on early with sci-fi and horror films. What were some of those films for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, dare I say I'm dating myself, but I saw Star Wars in its initial release when I was 6 years old, and I think from that point on I was pretty much addicted to the
Likewise
movies.
here. Don't worry, you're in good company.
Yeah, we're a bunch of old guys on this show. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you're not old. Stop it, because I'm not going to admit that I'm old either. So, you're not old. Stop it.
Yeah, right.
Well, and also, I'm from the East Coast, and we had a thing called Creature Double Feature that was on
you had
Saturday.
That too.
Yeah, Saturday mornings. I was obsessed with watching obscure Japanese horror movies and Godzilla stuff. And then
where did you grow up on the East Coast?
I grew up in Natick, Massachusetts, which I think I'm the third most famous person from there, the first being Doug Flutie, who won the Heisman Trophy winner.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Wow, okay. Cool.
So try being a film geek in one of the biggest sports communities of all in New England.
But I mean, that's good company, Doug Flutie. That's very cool.
Yeah, but actually, speaking of good company in the filmmaking realm, I think I read this correctly, where you found yourself in the company of Tom Savini when you were a teenager, and that's what initially inspired you to go into makeup. Is that true?
Yeah. My there was a horror convention in Boston when I was around 13 years old. My dad took me to, and Tom Savini was there, and he had brought stuff from Friday the 13th Part 4 and Creepshow, and I'm looking, he's got all this stuff on the stage. I'm there with my dad. I'm like, this guy makes monsters for a living. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And the luck for me is that my dad's a dentist, and a lot of the stuff they use in makeup effects are dental supplies. So, he knew pretty early on that I wasn't going to follow in the family footsteps and become a dentist, so at least he, got a little thrill out of me using alginate and dental acrylic and so forth to make monsters. But the irony being, though, is that later in life I became so good at especially doing teeth casts that anytime we would have a big celebrity that needed a cast of their teeth, they would send me to do it. So I'd call my dad and go, guess whose teeth I just did today.
It all paid off, but was there resistance on your family's part at first? Because I'm always curious about this, because someone that is inspired to go into special makeup effects or something like that, did they consider it a serious goal?
Well, you know what? I'm very blessed to have my parents were very supportive of me. I think they saw that I was because I was a good student, and I was an honor student growing up, and they saw how dedicated and focused I was on trying to teach myself how to do this, and that I was trying to do jobs. I'd work in video stores and make big displays, or I worked at a movie theater and I dressed up like Freddy Krueger when Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 came out. So I think they saw that I was driven and I was serious about this, and then ultimately I got into it very quickly when I came out to California.
Right. And when did that happen, or what was that trajectory like? You went to school, obviously, right?
Yeah, well, I came out, I obviously realized, they weren't doing a lot of makeup effects films in Natick, so I realized pretty quickly I had to get out to it was either New York or California, and I'm just more of a California type person. So when I was fortunate enough to get into USC, and I got involved with the student films, very quickly because I was sort of like a niche. You know what I mean? It's like everybody needed like blood and guts and so forth, and I was like the guy on campus who could do that. So I started working on a bunch of student films and got involved with the special effects club there. I became like the president of the special effects club, and I honestly, my third month out there, I met a makeup effects artist at one of these special effects functions, and I said, could I be your apprentice? And a month later, I was working on my first film. So
that's incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I just decided my first summer out there to sort of stay out in California, give it a try, and I got a job for Tony Gardner as a runner, working on like Addams Family and Mom and Dad Saved the World and Swamp Thing and stuff like that.
Well, this is interesting, and this ties in with our first guest tonight. Also early on in your career, you did work for the 90s incarnation of Land of the Lost, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I was a puppeteer for both seasons of it.
Wow. So tell me about that experience, because I see your makeup experience and also you have extensive puppetry experience. And tell me about the intricacies of that.
Well, you know what? Here's something funny. So I worked in makeup effects for 14 years, pretty much at the top of my game, but I can't sculpt, paint, or draw to save my life, which is very odd in a very artistic, form.
That's actually very encouraging.
I found stuff that I was good at, which was like doing stuff like foam construction, which is like taking like your couch and making it into a monster, and I was really good at making like fake animals, which I did on a lot of the Farrelly Brothers movies. But I found I started working for the Kyoto Brothers, who they're the ones who did like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and they did Team America. I worked for them on Critters 3 and 4, where here's a little bit of trivia. Who was the star of Critters 3?
You got me there.
The star of Critters 3.
Corey Feldman.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, really? Yeah, you're right.
Start out somewhere. I mean, come on, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was. He actually got the job on Growing Pains when we were filming Critters 3.
Wow.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually Angela Bassett was in Critters 4, ironically.
Critters has been a major stepping stone for many people.
Yeah, I know. It's really funny. Actually, Naomi Watts, I worked with her on Children of the Corn 4.
I do remember that.
Horror films are an awesome starting ground. I don't care what you say or who you are. Horror films are where everyone cuts their teeth and everything.
Yeah.
It's a great place and a great genre to work. But I want to ask you, because you were talking about you grew up watching the Godzilla films like a lot of us did. What was it like working on the Ultraman?
Oh, you know what? That was a fun show. It was really interesting because we were, there was a Japanese production, and they would basically just send us these pictures of all these, monsters, and we had to interpret them the best we could. They would send us two-dimensional pictures, like here's the front and here's the back, and they would pair us into teams because we had to make, 16 monsters, so there was like teams of 2. And me and my best friend Bill is now works for Pixar. I mean, he painted WALL-E. But we were in teams of 2, and we would you have to do these 3 monsters, and you have to basically just figure out how to do them. And those were made out of mattress foam, and it was just that and latex and stuff like that. And it was just where are we going to hide the scenes? Where are we going to hide the zippers? Which was the fun part.
But those, I always thought the special effects, even though they're the man in the suit. Those special effects, there's something very innocent about all those shows and all those old movies.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so much fun to watch. And because when you get the CGI overload and everything, those films are so innocent and so much fun.
Oh, yeah. And getting back to the puppeteering, I know I got off topic, but the puppeteering, I also did suit work as well. So I got to play a lot of monsters over the years. And it's really funny because even today, even though I'm sort of retired from makeup effects, if anybody invites me to do a puppeteering or play a monster, I'll still do it. I mean, I was an executive vice president of production for David Lancaster Productions, working on The Breed, I think, or Hollow Man 2, and I got a call from one of my old bosses. He was like, I know you don't do this anymore, but you want to come play a monster for 3 days in a Dairy Queen commercial? And I'm I turned to my boss, I'm I'm going to need 3 days off. And I went and played a monster for 3 days.
Cool.
Wow. It's just 'cause it's fun. I mean, that's the thing, Land of the Lost. That was a fun experience, and it was, puppeteering. I learned puppeteering from the Kyotos, and just, I loved the original Land of the Lost when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I got to play with the original Grumpy puppet. It was awesome. The Croft sent over all the original puppets that we could just sort of play with. Yeah,
wow.
I got to play a flea stack in an episode. How awesome is that?
Cool, very cool.
But I'm interested in just a couple more questions about your makeup work.
Yeah.
I had for you one of your regular collaborators, and you just mentioned them, the Farrelly brothers.
Yeah.
Tell me about that working relationship, what they're like.
Well, they were great. I mean, the funny thing is I was working on The Incredible Hulk, not the Ang Lee one, the one that Jonathan Hensleigh was going to direct. This was like years before. And we were doing like a promo, and I was working on that, and my boss comes up to me and he says, hey, I need to pull you off The Incredible Hulk to work on this new comedy by the guys who did Kingpin. You are not pulling me off The Incredible Hulk to work on a comedy by the guys who did Kingpin. I go, well, the script's kind of funny. You might like it. We need you to build these dogs. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I had no choice, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I read the script. It's kind of funny, you know what I mean? And, I build these fake dogs, and they wind up sending me to Florida. And, I'm down there for 2.5 weeks working. Ben Stiller, I was a huge fan of the Ben Stiller show, because that was really what he was famous for at the time. Cameron had just been in The Mask. She was really nice. Matt Dillon was like the biggest star there. And it was just such a great time. And they have a very family atmosphere and a really collaborative atmosphere. And, I wound up working on, I think, 5 of their films. And actually, my book, on the set, came out of that experience because it was such a pleasure to work with these people that a lot of the people I interviewed for my book and started helping me put the book together were some of the cast and crew of the Farrelly Brothers movies, including Peter and Bobby. Bobby actually was very supportive of me when I was writing this.
Yeah, and I want to get to that book, but tell me about in terms of the makeup industry. Are they threatened at all by computerized technologies, or are they separate entities?
I'm asked this question a lot, and I actually have a funny answer for it because, it's funny, when we were working on Ultraman, the whole group went together and saw Jurassic Park, right? And we were watching this movie, and we just turned to each other and said, boy, we are effed. You know what I mean? We are just completely screwed. This is the end of, this is the beginning of the end.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, what it did was it opened the door. Instead of it killing makeup effects, it actually opened the door for movies that couldn't get made before that couldn't all be done digitally. So there was a lot of makeup effects to do. So there was a sort of ironic renaissance of makeup effects shortly after Jurassic Park. And then I think what happened was then there was a turn where people just started using digital effects like as a crutch, you know what I mean? And it started really destroying the makeup effects business. But I think what you're seeing right now is, and I think this is due to things like Bourne Identity, is that there's a bit of a backlash against digital effects. And there's a certain unreality to it. And I think filmmakers like Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro are really showing that, look, it's not, you don't have to be, one or the other. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can use, a makeup effect and enhance it digitally. And that's sort of the best of both worlds.
I think so too, and it was a similar answer. We spoke to Del Toro's main makeup guy. His name escapes me. Right before the Oscars, he was up for Hellboy 2, and he had a similar outlook to it.
Mike Elizalde?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's what's so inspiring about guys like Del Toro. I mean, real movie magic. But in terms of your book. I'm wondering, with the new book on the set, what inspired it, and how does it expand upon your previous book about working on film sets?
Yeah, well, I heard my intro there. Actually, Movie Sets 101 is the original edition of this. This is actually the second 2009 edition of Movie Sets 101. It got picked up by a big distributor, and they wanted to change the title and sort of have me do an updated version of it. Okay. So the reason, I'm sorry, you asked me like sort of why I wrote this book, right, and how this sort of worked into this?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, when I was working on sets, because I'd worked on so many films, like 40 films, whatever, I started realizing that, boy, I'm getting yelled at a lot for things I don't know. And, it's like, boy, I got to know what an inky is when someone says, get the hell out of the way of that inky. You know what I mean?
Right.
But this isn't stuff that was taught me. And also, the rules of etiquette. There's all these rules of etiquette. Like, you have to yell flashing before you take a picture on set. I mean, do you guys know why you do that?
Tell us why.
Because I don't want Christian Bale to yell at me.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's two reasons. Because when a light goes off on a set, it usually flashes. So the gaffer will go, oh, crap, one of our lights is out. I got to stop everything and, fix the lights. Or if the DP is looking through the lens, and you flash a bright light in his face, he's not going to be too thrilled.
No, of course not.
Sort of out of a courtesy. So I started realizing that, there's a lot of information that you need to know, and you can't be myopic with your department. You got to know stuff about every department in order for your, to do your job properly.
Right.
And I had been working with a girl who was her first time on set, and she got yelled at twice, like within the space of 30 minutes. And she was crying, and she ran off set. And that is the moment I decided to write the book, because I put my arm around her and I said, basically you need a course in set etiquette. You know what I mean? It sort of just came up with that. You know what I mean? That was going to be the original title of the book. And it occurred to me, it's like, how she didn't know. How would she know?
That's true.
So I just started collecting this information, and because I've been so fortunate to work with a lot of really interesting people, they all sort of jumped on board and allowed me to interview them, because to me everybody's got a story. You know what I mean? And these rules of etiquette are, they're there for a reason, and I'm going to illustrate what those reasons are. So, basically what the book does is it takes each department, gives you an overview, who's in the department, what they do, terms you need to know for this department, no matter what department you work in, the rules of etiquette, and then sort of advice from experts.
Yeah, and it's an ingenious idea for a book, and I'm so glad that you wrote it. And I'm wondering, the first time that you found yourself on a sizable movie set, tell me about the atmosphere of a typical movie set, and what surprised you most about your first visit to one?
That's a good question, because I started in a lot of low-budget films. The first set that I would say I was officially sort of left to my own devices on was a movie called The Dark Backward, which I don't know if you've ever heard of, but it had Bill Paxton and Rob Lowe and James Caan and Laura Flynn Boyle. It was a really and Adam Rifkin directed it. Really a bizarre movie.
All right, Adam.
It's about a comedian, Judd Nelson, who grows a third arm. And I was arm harness maintenance guy. And my job was to put the fake arm on Judd Nelson. I mean, that was my job. It was really, overwhelming at first. I mean, it was wow. I mean, how do I know what these people are doing? But I found that, movie sets aren't as intimidating as people think they are, and they're not as, you see in the movies, that it's a bunch of people yelling at each other.
Right.
I got to be honest, most of my experiences have been very pleasant. I've worked on some, pretty tough shoots, but for the most part, they've been really pleasant experiences, and I've learned a lot. And that's the thing is, if you keep yourself open, if you, tell yourself, hey, look, I can always learn something, and you keep your eyes open, you can. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the thing, and it made me, it made me a better producer, number one, and that makes me a better writer. I mean, that's the thing is, everything's all part and parcel. Everything, I mean, I'm so lucky that I've worn so many hats in the business, because they've all overlapped with each other and helped me to become better at every other job. You know what I mean? And that's what's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a really dumb question, but it's one I think that really needs to be asked, just because you're talking about set etiquette and everything. What about the cell phone? Do they have I-things where you don't bring the cell phone or any of these little portable devices that make noise to the set? And I would imagine it's got to be difficult for some people.
Yeah, I mean, boy, you better fucking get good.
I know. I mean, there's always one or two. I can't turn this off. I'm expecting an important call, and it's what's more important than the film?
You're going to get kicked off the set, and you better know. You better be prepared to get your ass handed to you if your cell phone goes off during this one of a kind shot that they can't replicate. So I mean, that's just, to me, that's one of those common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense, but it's always. Yeah. younger kids, as the youngers don't, think that doesn't apply to them and stuff. I see this all the time. I mean, I just see it, let's see, in the movie theater, I just see it with the cell phones going off and the people taking calls, so.
Oh, I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I know, that's the problem with new technology is sometimes, I mean, we'll put that, I'm sure we'll have another chapter on that in the 2011 edition.
Yeah, shut your BlackBerry off. Leave it in the car.
Tell me about who you're writing this book for. Obviously, people that are interested in entering any facet of the filmmaking career. But what can the average movie lover get from this book, do you think?
Well, here's the thing. That's what's really I love about the book is that it's really broad enough for a lot of people because, yes, it's perfect for a film student, and yes, it's perfect for the novice filmmaker who's, new to sets. But here's the irony. I've talked to people who, been in the business for years who, were excited about buying the book and bought it and still learned some stuff from it. But for the average, hey, I just, like movies, I think what's great about it is everybody loves film terminology. So it's packed with film terminology. Everybody loves, to hear stories about how, people got in the business. You know what I mean? And this, has people as high as Wes Craven and Tom DeSanto who, he just produced Transformers 1 and 2. It's got, Owen Roizman who shot The Exorcist. It's got these kind of stories of how they got in the business. But then in every chapter, there's set horror stories. And this is the part that everybody loves. So, you mentioned the Christian Bale thing. This book is chock full of them, and they're not, and only a small amount of them are from anonymous sources. So, I mean, these are great, great stories that some of them are just absolutely, gut-wrenchingly, horrifying. You would just want to shoot yourself if this was you. And some of them are just really just laugh-out-loud funny. So it's a fun, that's the great thing I get about the book, the comment I get. It's it's a fun book to read, whether you work in the business or not.
It is. I've been rabidly reading through it, and it is a fantastic book. I'm enjoying it so very much. And it's called On the Set, The Hidden Rules of Movie Making Etiquette. You can purchase it right here on our homepage if you'd like. It'll take you directly to the page where you can purchase it and still listen to our show. Terrific. Talk about technology working for you.
Yeah.
I want to, before I let you go, I want to ask about another of your many talents, which also involves writing, which is you're doing work with comics.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, this is really amazing. I was a big comic fan when I was younger, and sort of fell out of it for a while, and started realizing that I just love writing in all these different mediums, and I just had a lot of friends who worked in the comic field, and I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with Blue Water Comics. And, they read one of my spec screenplays, a horror sci-fi thing that I wrote, and they said, well, geez, you seem like a really great writer. We'd love you to take a stab at one of our licensed properties. And the first thing they offered me was Roger Corman's Black Scorpion. And, this was just Joey
there you go, man.
Yeah, and I was like, Black Scorpion? And I'm like, sure, because the answer to all those questions is, of course, okay? And, I just sort of, dug my heels in and came up with they gave me full reign to sort of, do a redux, like a Dark Knight kind of redux.
Mm-hmm.
So I just came up with the best story I possibly could, and they loved it, sent it to Roger Corman, and Roger Corman loved it. And off I was on writing, a 4-issue Black Scorpion, and I was really enjoying it. And then the thing that differentiates, comics and movies is that when you write a script, first of all, it may never get made. You know what I mean? Right. And maybe only a certain handful of people will read it. When you do a comic, a couple of weeks later, they start sending you pages of artwork. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I wrote. This is what I wrote. So they were, just thrilled with my enthusiasm. They said, hey, do you want to do another one? And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? You want to do Deathstalker and Barbarian Queen? And I'm like, Deathstalker and Barbarian Queen?
Of course.
Scraping of the bottom. I'm like, of course. And I pitched them I read about a bunch of Robert E. Howard stuff, and like just read some early Conan, and I'd never written a fantasy like that before, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write the best one I possibly can, and I love it. I mean, like, I hope people will give it a chance. And I joke with the publisher, I'm like, God knows who's going to buy Deathstalker and Barbarian Queen, but if they do, boy, are they going to enjoy themselves.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's good. Hey, that's the whole point.
And this was just announced. I hope we're not out of school for mentioning it here, but you're developing a Logan's Run comic?
Yeah. Yes. Now this is, cut to, a couple of months later, I'm like writing 5 comic book series and, a lot of one-shots, and they offer me Logan's Run. Darren from Blue Water calls me up and he's like, hey, look, you sitting down? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, how would you like to write Logan's Run? And I almost had a friggin' heart attack, because one of my first memories was seeing a double bill of Star Wars and Logan's Run at a drive-in in Cape Cod.
Wow.
I mean, like, this was definitely, an influential movie in my, growing up. I think I've seen the movie like 25 times.
Is this coincide with the Bryan Singer's remake one day, or? No,
and see, this is the funny thing, and I know Bryan. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for like 18 years, and I actually ran into Bryan a couple of weeks ago, and I told him, I go, like, Bryan, I have some weird news. I'm writing Logan's Run, and he's like, really? Because he goes, because I was just reading McQuarrie's draft again, and I was thinking of revisiting it, and he goes, maybe we should get together and talk about what you're doing. And so, it's interesting. I don't know. I haven't read, the McQuarrie draft. I don't know what they're doing, but mine is based on the trilogy of books. But I bring my screenwriting aesthetics to my comic book writing. So it's a very cinematic story that I'm telling, and I'm basically using, it's a 6-issue arc to begin with, and that's going to sort of encompass both the first 2 books in the series, but sort of my sort of retake on it. But I just had, I wrote an 18-page treatment of the whole series, and William Nolan read it last week, and we had a meeting on Friday, and he's thrilled. He's thrilled. I got minor notes on it, which, and the nicest compliment he gave me was, he goes, there was something I came up with, and he's like, you know what? If I had thought of that when I was writing the book, I would have put that in the book. And how great a compliment is that?
That's an awesome compliment.
Yeah, that's the ultimate, man.
Yeah, so I just started. They just announced it today, and I actually just started writing the first issue, in earnest a couple of days ago, and they're fast tracking it to get it out in November.
Oh, wow.
The artist is amazing. But and just one more plug. My first official comic book is coming out next month, which is an issue of Vincent Price Presents, issue 10.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
That's
really
that's fantastic. Yeah. I'm wondering if you participate in comic conventions or film-related, horror film-related, sci-fi conventions as a panelist.
Yeah, well, you know what? I speak at the Doctor Who convention. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I speak at the Doctor Who convention every year. I've been a guest there for years. I go to Comic-Con. I used to speak at Comic-Con, and then I go to this thing called Comic Book Sundays, which is really great, which if you look up on Facebook, which is sort of a gathering of comic book people. And then I'm involved with the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films and the Saturn Awards. I help produce the Saturn Awards.
What's really moving to me is, looking back at your life and as a 13-year-old kid and being inspired to take this life journey at one of those conventions, meeting Tom Savini.
Yeah.
When you look at the people you're speaking to at these conventions, do you see versions of yourself at that age?
Oh, yeah. I speak, I lecture, because of the book, I lecture a lot at film schools, too. And I always say, dude, you guys could be sitting next to the next Spielberg, or you could be the next Spielberg. I could be working for you guys 6 months from now, and they always laugh, but it's the truth, because you never know. And I'll tell you, I met some students. One of these students, I actually pulled out of there to actually do the art for a graphic novel that I set up, because he was so fantastic.
Wow.
And there's somebody who's like, he's just in film school, and this is a paying gig to draw this graphic novel, and this is something that Steven Susko wrote. The Grudge is attached as a producer.